Hello, everyone. Welcome to Southeastern 14. I am Blayne Gilmer, and I'm excited to come to you once again talking SEC football here on Southeastern 14. We have daily coverage of the SEC, and we are going to be dropping our predictions for week 4 this week. Today, actually, as you'll see on this channel, just game after game of predictions as we're getting full swing into SEC play here, and we'll have all those out later in the week. We'll have betting picks from Brian Edwards, who's been a Vegas insider for, over 20 years now. So you want to hear those. Jake Crane on Fridays and Jake's Takes. So there's so much football content right here. But right now, guys, as we do each and every Monday, it's time for the SEC Morning Report. And on Mondays, we talk about what we learned about each and every SEC team. And we're going to start off with the Alabama Crimson Tide as they go down to Tampa and just have a head-scratching performance against the USF Bulls. One, it's weird that game was in Tampa to begin with. Two, what is going on at the quarterback position for Alabama? Jalen Milroe, not exactly the problem, we found out, because Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson, neither one looked very proficient in their efforts, and the offensive line porous as it has been all year. Caden Proctor and company cannot protect the quarterback. Now, I know that there's some blame that has to go on the quarterback for not feeling pressure at different times, whether that's Buckner or whether that's Simpson, things of that nature. But Milroe, at least in that Texas game, Milroe looked like he was able to create and help to keep that offense, on schedule somewhat with his legs. I just didn't see any life out of the offense when Buckner was running it, of course, at all. When Simpson was running it, there was the one big play to Dupree, and then you got to give Roydell Williams his flowers for running hard on the day. But that is a defensive front that they should have dominated. They did to the tune of, over 200 rushing yards, but it was a lackluster performance for sure. Nothing that you would expect out of Alabama. And I just think that this problem with the quarterback is something that maybe there was a knee-jerk reaction on in terms of getting rid of Milroe. This is a perfect game to, I guess, sleepwalk through, to say, hey, look, we've got other issues here. I don't know if Saban was trying to just give other guys an opportunity, see if there would be a spark. But Jalen Milroe definitely, I think, will be back in there and being the guy for this offense. And can Tommy Rees adapt and not just drop him back over and over again, move the pocket, cut the field in half, do more almost triple option zone read based type stuff, utilize the strength of Jalen Milroe, which is tremendous athleticism, strong arm, okay? Take some shots down the field, but find ways to tailor your offensive design to the strengths of your players. That's what the best coaches do, and that's what it's going to be incumbent upon this Alabama staff to do with the quarterback play that they have, because at this point, nobody else is walking in that door. They have to take care of it with the three they have. But I think Milroe is by far the best option going forward. And I thought it was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. As I said, going into the week, I just didn't think Tyler Buckner was going to be that guy. What didn't look to be that guy when he was at Notre Dame, definitely didn't look to be that guy for Alabama last week. So Alabama has a major QB problem is one thing we learned. And then also that offensive line is struggling to protect whichever quarterback is in there. So that is what we learned about the Alabama Crimson Tide. What we learned about Arkansas. Guys, Arkansas can't get out of their own way. They're an undisciplined team. Whether it's self-inflicted wounds with penalties. They had 14 penalties for 125 yards against BYU. They aren't, making the wisest decisions at times in terms of, okay, how are we utilizing the offensive personnel? Secondly, they're not protecting KJ Jefferson well enough at all. They had 4 sacks. BYU did against Arkansas, and without Rocket Sanders, it's like, okay, where are we going to get the major production from other than KJ pulling it down with his legs and trying to make something happen? They're not getting a ton of separation at the wide receiver position when it comes to, okay, getting open and be able to make plays for this offense. And it's not like they played terrible in every aspect of the game. It was just they were bad at the wrong times against BYU. You go look at the box score. Arkansas, basically won every category. They outrushed them. They in terms of third down conversions, BYU wasn't just straight marching down the field all the time, but Arkansas was 2 of 13 on third down conversions and couldn't keep momentum going, couldn't keep the ball long enough to make sure that they were able to squelch out any kind of BYU comeback. Because remember, Arkansas was up 14-0 at one point early in this game, had a great special teams play and a return by Isaiah Sategna. But they don't have enough guys that are just, playmakers on that offense that are going to make a difference, without having something schemed up where they're just wide open. I mean, these guys have to be able to create separation. They have to be able to help KJ Jefferson out. They have to be able to protect KJ Jefferson. And now they're going on the road to Baton Rouge. So that will be an even harder place for that offensive line to kind of gel together, so to speak, with a big road trip coming to Baton Rouge. And we know how good LSU looked last week against Mississippi State. So Arkansas, we learned that, hey, you got to fix some of those issues up front, and you got to have somebody that's going to step up and make some plays with Rocket Sanders out. KJ Jefferson can't do everything alone. Auburn. What did we learn about the Auburn Tigers as they are getting prepared for a matchup with Texas A&M this week? I think we learned a little bit that Peyton Thorne is going to be the guy. They're going to cut down on that rotation. And there's, rumors that Robbie Ashford was working some at receiver. So you heard Hugh Freeze talk about it after the Cal game. He said, hey, I was not happy with the rotation that we had at quarterback. I'm not sure that's how I want to go about doing it going forward. Peyton Thorne made some nice throws. They actually pushed the ball down the field a little bit, albeit against an opponent in Samford who they should have dominated. Now, there was a couple of times where I thought Samford's defensive front really stymied Auburn's run game, especially on a couple of short yardage situations, and I think that's a little bit concerning. They've yet to get Jarquez Hunter really going. Damari Alston has been okay at times, but they haven't been able to get that running game going outside of QB run a lot of times. And Peyton Thorne did show off his legs, but again, against a more just an inferior opponent with not as much athleticism, I think that's going to be much harder to do versus Texas A&M. But what we need to see is, okay, Peyton Thorne, you're that guy. They're gonna roll with you at QB. We've got to get rid of the highs and the lows. There's too many times in Cal where it was just up and down, and then even in the Samford game, a couple of throws that he wished he'd had back, a couple of turnovers. Won't be able to do that at Kyle Field and get away with it there for Auburn. So want to see more consistency out of Peyton Thorne and want to see them get the running game going a little bit. But what we learned is Peyton Thorne has it in him to be a guy who can be dynamic for this Auburn team. Now we need to learn this week, can he do it with consistency and against competition that is more to Auburn's level and is very, very much so athletic in that defensive front of Texas A&M. So that's what we learned about the Auburn Tigers in week 3. The Florida Gators. We learned that Billy Napier can design a running game scheme. My goodness. When it comes to pre-snap looks, whether it's shifts and then motions after it or different formations, Tennessee's defensive head collectively was spinning. Tim Banks and company were not prepared, it seemed like, for what Florida was throwing at them in terms of those multiple looks. You just see, I'm so impressed with that, with what Billy Napier is able to do in terms of creating gaps and creating angles for Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson. Those two were ultra impressive. But I think even before the play ever occurred, you had Graham Mertz and that Florida offense set up for success, where they were going to be able to take advantage of bubbles in Tennessee's defensive front, of a particular gap, and the vision of Trevor Etienne was excellent, on point. 172 yards rushing, just unreal for the young man out of Louisiana for the Gators. So I'm excited to see where this running game goes for Florida from here. It certainly helps out Ricky Pearsall and those Florida wide receivers when you have that run game that is catching the attention of that second level of that defense and giving more room to operate behind, whether it's play action, things of that nature for Graham Mertz and those receivers. So you got to give Billy Napier credit for being able to just out scheme Tennessee. And also they played much, much better across the offensive front than Tennessee's defensive front played. We said the whole key to this game was, could Tennessee create negative plays and make Florida one-dimensional? They could not. Tennessee was getting pushed back the entire night when it comes to that offensive line of Florida. And you're seeing that offensive line for Florida, guys who weren't as experienced. They weren't returning starters for Florida. 4 out of 5 guys, new starters for Florida on the offensive line. But man, they have kind of come together pretty rapidly in the swamp. And we also learned that when Florida is rocking, and in this, especially in a rivalry like Tennessee and Florida, that the swamp can play a pretty big difference over there with that electricity of that crowd. And the Florida Gators are someone that you got to stop and look at now, where they were all kind of left for dead a couple of weeks ago. Florida looks like a team that is formidable and somebody that, as long as they are able to feed those running backs and get that running game going early, they're going to be tough for a lot of people to contend with, particularly there in Gainesville. So that is what we learned about the Florida Gators. The Georgia Bulldogs, we learned that they have some resolve about them. Yes, it would have been easy to kind of go in the tank when they got punched in the mouth against South Carolina, but they stepped up. They were resilient in that second half and really turned it on when they had to. Struggling 14-3 down in the first half, they come out with a tremendous drive to start things off, get the play action going, and then run it in. 3 rushing touchdowns in the second half for Georgia. But we also learned that this team has some issues in the red zone. They're moving the ball at will on teams, it seems, but they stall out frequently in the red zone. And questionable play calling. People are calling. I was there at the game for Georgia and heard plenty of calls in the stands, things like that, for people being like frustrated with Mike Bobo and his play calling there on certain situations, particularly in the red zone. Georgia just has to be able to execute better in those situations and not put themselves behind the chains at one point, whether it's a penalty, holding penalty that drives them back a little bit, or getting down close and a couple missed field goals. I mean, there was points left on the field by Georgia on Saturday. They're still missing Ladd McConkey with a back injury. I wouldn't expect to see him back until probably the Auburn week, if that. So, I mean, that's a big deal when you're losing a guy who's been that experienced and done that much for this Georgia program. And Ladd McConkey, a guy that many people coming into the season were saying, hey, this guy could be a second, third round draft pick. So a productive receiver, a talented receiver that Georgia is missing, and they're starting to finally get some cohesion there between Carson Beck and Dominic Lovett, Carson Beck and Ra Thomas. Got to get Brock Bowers going a little bit more there. But Dejan Edwards was a difference maker. He helped get that run game going a little bit. But we learned that I think the biggest thing I learned out of this Georgia team is there seemed to be void of leadership in terms of, okay, who is the emotional leader? Last year you had Stetson Bennett, who had that swagger on offense, and then you had Nolan Smith, who everybody gravitated towards with that big personality. Well, those guys are gone. But who is going to be that emotional leader? Javon Bullard, I think, could be that guy. Maybe Marcus Rosemy Jack Saint could be that guy on offense. But my goodness, you just don't see it. Definitely out of Carson Beck. He's a non-emotional guy. Kirby Smart said that. He said, hey, he's just even kill, and sometimes it's almost too even kill. Need to see some spark, some emotion, some fight early on from a Georgia team, looking to see them play a complete game against UAB in a final tune-up for them before they hit even further conference play. But South Carolina, got to give them credit, but Georgia has to figure some things out in the red zone and just get the energy going earlier in games, start faster. Speaking of getting the energy going earlier in the games, Kentucky needs to do so as well. When it comes to this Kentucky offense, they've just been kind of consistent, kind of going out there and they end up putting good numbers up by the end of games, but they've been playing very inferior competition with Eastern Kentucky, Ball State, Akron, all these teams. They're going to get Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt this week, and you're going to see a Kentucky team that is running the ball well with Ray Davis. They need to get Devin Leary, Dane Key, Tavion Robinson, Barry Brown going earlier in ball games, being able to take advantage of that trio of receivers that they have, and also an experienced quarterback that has a ton of talent. But they absolutely have to get started earlier. And I don't know if that's getting the ball out on the perimeter quick. I don't know if it's taking shots and maybe loosening up the back end of the defense, but whatever it is, they have to play more complementary football. Can't rely on Ray Davis to just truck through defenses for the entire time. Okay, he is averaging 7.2 yards per carry, but my goodness, we need to see Devin Leary get started earlier in ball games, and I think Liam Cohen has to find ways to create those easy access throws, take advantage of the matchups that they clearly have advantages in with those talented receivers. We came into the league this year saying, hey, those are three of the more talented receivers in the country over there as a group for Kentucky, and Devin Leary has that experience. They're going to need him to play well early, even though it's a Vanderbilt team that is not very good, and we'll get to them at the end here. But you're on the road in the SEC, need to come out, start well early. Don't want to give any of whatever Vandy crowd is there reason to believe late in that game. 13.5-point favorite, handle business, go out there, run the football on a bad Vanderbilt defensive front and get started early. That's what we need to learn out of Kentucky. And what we did learn out of Kentucky is, hey, guys that can make plays, and Ray Davis is just a really, really valuable piece for Kentucky early on in this season. LSU, we learned not to doubt LSU is what we learned. I particularly doubted them after I saw them basically quit against Florida State. And I didn't think Florida State was some end-all, be-all team. I know they're a good team, but we saw this week, hey, they struggled against a Boston College team that is not very good. I think LSU really hurt themselves more than anything in that FSU game. They gave up a little bit. I thought early kick, okay, that could be trouble in Starkville. But, man, they came out there and from the jump got Malik Neighbors going. I said coming into the season that Malik Neighbors is the best receiver in the SEC. You have to be able to just basically give him as many touches as you possibly can. And My goodness, they absolutely went to town. 188 yards for Malik Neighbors in the first half alone. He was somebody that just that secondary could not handle for Mississippi State, and LSU has to take those shots that it took early. I was happy to see the aggressiveness of Jaden Daniels in terms of being willing to push the ball down the field a little bit. He was very, very efficient, but also explosive at the same time. I think we just learned that Jaden Daniels and that wide receiving core are as talented and as capable as we thought they were. They just have to be willing to take those shots, and they have to play. There's a difference between playing with reckless abandon and playing not to lose. And I feel like at times Jaden Daniels and company were playing not to lose early on in the season in that FSU game, where now I feel like Mike Denbrock and company are beginning to break out and use the complement of those weapons and be aggressive, put the foot on the gas to start off with. But Jaden Daniels, only one incompletion in the first half of that game, and they just had a full-on blitzkrieg against Mississippi State early on in that one. LSU now going to get a Arkansas team that is has their backs against the wall. Can they come out and make it 2 games in a row where LSU is really executing? I do think we learned that, Jaden Daniels is still Jaden Daniels, but we also learned that, hey, can we continue to get some run production out of the running backs over there, not make Jaden Daniels run the ball all the time? I think that's something I'd still like to see out of LSU. But overall, we learned that, hey, LSU is still LSU in terms of what we thought about them coming in to the preseason. Mississippi State, we learned that it's just totally out of sync offensively, and they don't really have an identity right now. When they're not able to run the football, they don't have a way to create explosive plays in the passing game, and that's a little bit odd, with Will Rogers and what he's been able to do over his career. But it seems like the transition from Kevin Barbay or from Mike Leach's offense to Kevin Barbay's offense is just taking a lot longer than anticipated. There's personnel issues that they're working through, implementing tight ends to this unit now and trying to figure out, okay, how are they going to create opportunities down the field? And they haven't been able to protect Will Rogers well, and against an elite front against LSU, they weren't able to run it like they thought they would be able to. Not great in terms of being able to handle athleticism up front, and they'll see plenty of that in the SEC. So you have to find ways to get the ball out of Will Rogers' hands quickly and create some opportunities for guys like Tulu Griffin to make plays out there on the perimeter and help that run game out a little bit. Not have people load up in the box on Woody Marks and company. So we learned that the Mississippi State offense is in disarray and needs to really, really self-evaluate going forward as they head into SEC play here. Missouri, what we learned about Missouri is that if you let Brady Cook go out and do his thing and don't kind of shackle him, just let him go out and play football, then he will find his weapons like Luther Burden, that he will go out and he will create for this Missouri offense. We knew that they were going to be good defensively with all of the seniors and the returning starters and the like coming back for Missouri. We knew that side of the ball was going to be good, and they faced a very, very good Will Howard-led Kansas State team on that side of the ball, made enough plays, had, Chris Abrams drained with a pick in that game. But Brady Cook being able to, shake off some of the doubters. Plenty of people were calling for Sam Horn and calling for change in this offense. But when they feed the ball to Luther Burden, when they create opportunities down the field for this Missouri offense, it's a formidable opponent for anybody because of what that defense can be. And then, of course, when you're there in Como, I always say weird things happen in Como. So I think what we learned here is that Eli Drinkwitz has a good roster over there that can handle big moments, particularly the kicker with the 61-yard bomb was unbelievable with Harrison Mavis, who is just man, the thicker kicker is a story all in himself. But when it comes down to Brady Cook, he's got guts. He's a competitor, and when he had to, he was able to get the ball to the key playmakers, whether it's Luther Burden or Theo Wees. They got just enough out of the run game. So big win for Missouri. But I think what we learned is, hey, trust Brady Cook and go let him play. He's not just a game manager. He's a guy who can make plays in big moments for you. And I think that's a great thing to see for a guy who has really kind of bided his time and been maligned a lot. But hey, good for Brady Cook and Missouri. Ole Miss. I think we're learning that Ole Miss has an elite player in Jackson Dart. He was in a quarterback battle, wasn't even named the starter till right before the season, and he is playing as good a football as anybody in the SEC. Whether it's getting it done with his legs or whether it's throwing the ball, not even with Trey Harris healthy for this game, he is playing in a way that Ole Miss knows that, hey, they can trust Jackson Dart. And I think that's the biggest thing going into this Alabama game. Who do you trust more offensively? And if Ole Miss is able to come out and manufacture some offense against a very good Alabama defense, if they can get to 24, 28, 30 points in this game, will Alabama be able to keep pace? Jackson Dart is going to be, a guy that they're going to have to count on with their legs because we don't know what the health of Quinshad Judkins is. Lane Kiffin said, hey, he's kind of a warrior for just going out there and playing. He hadn't practiced much against Georgia Tech. Doesn't really say necessarily what the injury is, but if they can get anything out of Quinshad Judkins, I think we've learned that Jackson Dart is playing at an elite level for Lane Kiffin right now. And if they can get a little bit more production out of Quinshad, if he can heal up, that this offense for Ole Miss can be dangerous. Michael Trigg over there, Jordan Watkins, Trey Harris when he's healthy, all of these guys making plays for Ole Miss. And I think that Jackson Dart has an opportunity against a Alabama defense that in the past, one thing that is hurt Alabama is guys that can be dual threat, that do things with their legs, keep defenses guessing a little bit. Jackson Dart has the ability to do that. I think you've seen him mature into a guy. What we've learned is he's matured into a guy that is not going to be just one read and pull it down. He can go through his progressions and he can help this Ole Miss offense navigate a lot of different looks in many ways here. So Ole Miss has a quarterback playing at an elite level, has multiple weapons that they can spread it around to, even when Quinshad Judkins isn't there. That's what we've learned about Ole Miss through week 3. South Carolina, we learned that Spencer Rattler just is playing at a tremendous level, but he has zero help. He comes out like a house of fire and just, hitting receivers all over the place, buying time, making sure that he's able to, elude pressure a little bit, drift in the pocket and take care of business for South Carolina, find those receivers. Dow Loggins, I think you got to give him credit, a guy that I've been pretty critical of that hire, but he designed a good game plan to get the ball as quickly as possible out of Spencer Rattler's hands. And then just eventually the lack of a running game kills South Carolina, and the opposing defense knows, hey, we can just pin our ears back and come after the quarterback. But they've got to be able to establish some form of a run game. Not able to do that against Georgia or anybody this year. But I think what we learned is, hey, Spencer Rattler is going to be a good pro. He's going to have opportunities at the next level, and he just has nothing around him right now. So South Carolina is going to have to continue to try to recruit well, and bring people in the transfer portal to really fix their issues overall, because the offensive line and the run game is a detriment to what Spencer Rattler and company are trying to do through the air over there. Also, Juice Wells banged up now, broken foot possibly. So they could be without their best receiver for a while, as he's been hobbled to start the year. Tennessee. I think what we learned about Tennessee is this is not the same disciplined team that we saw last year for Josh Heupel. They make too many self-inflicted mistakes, and also we just learned that Joe Milton is not accurate as he needs to be. He's not a guy that can consistently, put the ball into tight windows that are what is considered open in the SEC. He can make a wow throw every once in a while, but he's not consistent enough. Tennessee didn't run the ball well enough to be able to win this game, and people, they misconstrue that all the time about Heupel's offense. They want to say, okay, well, it's high flying. It's these chunk plays through the air, and when it comes down to it, they really have to get the run game going. They weren't able to do so. Only 100 yards rushing against the Florida, against that Florida defensive front. And I know people like to say, "Oh, well, time of possession doesn't matter for Tennessee because they can score so quickly." I think that was correct when you had Jalen Hyatt, when you had Cedric Tillman. I know they had a big play for a touchdown in this game, but the time of possession is something that I know that doesn't matter when you're talking about Tennessee because they can go so lightning fast and because they can score quick. But I think in these new clock rules, in this new where the possessions are limited, where people are able to bleed the clock so much more, I think it does start to come into effect a little bit. And when you're not able to keep drives going, they were 8 of 15 on third down, 0 of 3 on fourth down, only 17 first downs on the night, but the 10 penalties for 79 yards is what hurt Tennessee, and not being able to run the football, and then Joe Milton not making all the throws when he needs to. This offense has some issues, so I think that's what we learned about Tennessee is that, hey, not exactly just plug and play when you've lost talented players like Jalen Hyatt, like Cedric Tillman, like Hendon Hooker. It's going to have to be something that when they don't have their A game running the football, they're going to have to find ways to be productive offensively, and they were not able to do so down in Gainesville with a hostile crowd and also a defense that was playing very complimentary to a offense for Florida that was running the football well. And then Austin Armstrong called a good game for the Florida Gators. So Tennessee, when you don't have your A game, what are you going to be able to turn to provide that offensive firepower that they needed down there against the Gators? Texas A&M, I think we just learned that, hey, they got to get healthy. They got to get ready for an Auburn team that is going to, bring good competition. Hugh Freeze is gonna have them revved up to play on the road against a Texas A&M team. They've already won a tough road game earlier this year in that Cal game, so they have some experience going on the road. Now it's going to be a different environment with Kyle Field over there. I think Jimbo Fisher saw that, hey, we have an elite quarterback play in Connor Wigman in this game. He is just tremendous with his decision making right now. Even in that Miami game, I thought he played really well. And I think if they get those receivers healthy, whether it's Evan Stewart, whether it's Noah Thomas, of course they have Aniyah Smith that they can turn to. Moose Muhammad hasn't really got going this year for Texas A&M, so I think Texas A&M learned, hey, we've got weapons. We got to get people healthy. We got to get rested up for an Auburn team coming in. But I think the biggest thing they know is, hey, Connor Wigman is that guy. He's the real deal. Let's try to get healthy around him. And I think Texas A&M can still have a good year. Now we're going to need to see if that secondary, can they hold up, because Hugh Freeze is going to try to dial up some shot plays, especially after seeing what Miami did with those chunk plays through the air and how Tyler Van Dyke ripped them up. Can Peyton Thorne do the same? I think that's going to be the big question going forward. But what we learned about Texas A&M is Connor Wigman continues to play at that elite level. It's him and Jackson Dart, and then Spencer Rattler to a different extent because of not having as much around him. But Connor Wigman and Jackson Dart both playing at elite levels at the quarterback position right now. And Texas A&M has a really good one. That's one thing we learned about them in week 3. And then Vanderbilt, we learned that Vanderbilt's just one of the worst teams in all of college football. They can't stop the run at all. It's just not it's just not a good look for Clark Lee's squad, who kind of took a step forward and seems to have taken 2 steps back this year. So they win a couple of ACC games last year against Florida, against Kentucky, and now it's going to be a real struggle. They're going to have to upset some teams to be able to make a bowl game. You know, they had a lead in this game. They squander it. They just couldn't make plays enough defensively when they needed to. Back a couple of weeks ago against Wake Forest, they gave up 288 yards rushing against the Demon Deacons, and now it's just becoming a bleak picture for Vanderbilt with Kentucky coming in, and I don't see them being able to slow Ray Davis down in that running game. And we know that Ray Davis went to Vandy last year, so that's going to be a tough situation for them. But guys, that's what we learned about every SEC football team here in week 3. And we've got a lot of coverage coming up of week 4. We got guys who are helping us do all kinds of content, whether it's Brian Edwards or Jake Crane. Brian Edwards from Vegas Insider, the Major Wager as well, and then Jake Crane of the Crane and Company show over there on the Daily Wire. So make sure you're subscribed here for that daily SEC coverage. We have picks. Chris Lee and I are starting to put out our previews and predictions of week 4 games. So those will be coming out starting today. But like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Make sure to check out Chomps. You'll see that in the description down there. It's a great natural protein snack. 9 different flavors that you can take advantage of for game days, things like that. A healthy snack that is going to help keep you fueled up on game days. So check out Chomps. But for everybody at Southeastern 14, I am Blayne Gilmer. We'll catch you guys next time to talk more SEC football as we get into the teeth of this SEC schedule right here on Southeastern 14.